I've already learned more in this episode than doing 4 with Roger. So, I mean.
God, it's messed up. Hello and welcome back to the Net Gains Podcast. I am your host, one of your hosts, Roger Parent. I'm an ex-CEO, former pro athlete, and father of 3.
And I'm your co-host. Yes, it is 50-50, Roger. I know you're trying to take over, but it is 50-50. I'm your co-host, Frank Field. I compete on the AVP Tour while also working for one of Roger's companies.
Frank and I are sick and tired of the mental toughness gurus out there telling people to just push harder or that they're just lazy. This broad advice that you can't apply to your real life. So the truth is, the mind is a muscle and you need to train it just like any other muscle. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give you simple, digestible tips on how highly successful people train their minds.
Remember to like, subscribe, and follow along with the podcast every episode to find practical tips on how you can do some really cool things. Or don't, because we love adversity. Don't we, Roger?
We love adversity. Frank, what are we talking about today?
All right, so today we got a little bit of a different topic today. We have a guest. Yes, our first guest on the podcast. It is our mutual friend, good friend of the show, Eddy Delsignore. He has his master's degree in counseling psychology with a concentration in sports psychology. So a great guest for the pod. We're going to do a lot of talk on goal setting, mental toughness, how to win. Really, we kind of go all over the place with this one. So really, really great episode, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. But before we go into that, we have our Newsworthy Legends. So, Roger, you have the first one for us?
The first one here.
I actually sourced both of these. So
it's the first time I've seen them. So the first one here
mental toughness, baby. On the spot. Let's go.
The first one here is Erica Hart. She's a pet detective in the UK. She uses drones with thermal imaging and has rescued over 330 dogs over the last 6 years. She hasn't taken a penny for her work, and she does it for the good of the world. Rescued 330 dogs over the last 6 years.
I'm just laughing because you're just reading off the bullets that I wrote. You just read the bullets word for word.
What else am I supposed to do? You just told me to just read your story.
Oh, yeah. No, she is a beast. She is a beast. I can speak on it. But, yeah, she started, she'd never even used a drone until like 2019, I think. And then she got a drone for, I don't know, some holiday or her birthday or something, and just started using it to find lost animals. And, you know, like I said in the article, she found 330 lost dogs, cats. There's like an emu or something in there. Yeah, and won't take any money. So talk about a good person.
She's also burned through 30 different drones.
Oh, you did read the article. Okay.
I
nice.
did.
All right.
Well, whatever you were saying there, I was looking at the article.
Yeah. Actually, those things can't be cheap, right? I've never owned a drone, but if you're going through 30 of those things, that's probably costing her a pretty penny.
I think there's like a massive variety in quality when it comes to drones. I've seen some people with like the video drones that like can go miles away, and they're just like have that huge tablet that they're flying it with. And then I've seen others that are like Fisher Price toys that are like,
yeah,
they just
I didn't realize those things could go miles.
Yeah, you can get crazy shots with them.
Wow.
I don't even know how it connects that far, but
Bluetooth?
Apparently it does. Yeah, Bluetooth. There's no way Bluetooth connects miles.
Wait, what is Bluetooth? This is a genuine question. I feel like you would know that.
I don't know. Remember when they used to have like the earbud things? I think that was when Bluetooth was invented, when people would take phone calls using like the first sort of like headsets, Bluetooth headsets.
Like the bigger headset, right? With the mouthpiece that would come down.
I just remember my dad wearing like a giant triangle on his ear to take Bluetooth calls. You don't remember those?
No, I don't. I know.
Garrett will find it and put a picture up.
Yeah. So I feel like if anyone would know what Bluetooth was, it'd be you. But I guess we'll have to save that for another episode.
It's just a connection. It's just a wireless connection.
God, I can tell Roger wants to go to bed. He's just on our Word doc over to the right, just skipping up and down with his cursor all over the
place, dude.
Yeah.
Move on to the next article.
He's been hanging out with a toddler for 12 hours and then had to jump on a podcast with another toddler for 2 hours. So, big day.
It's been a long weekend.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Okay, next one. Anything else on our dear Erica Hart?
No.
Okay.
Nothing.
All right. Next one I had was, this was a couple weeks ago. There were 2 snowboarders who went up on a lift, and I can't actually remember where this happened, but there was avalanche warnings and snowdrift warnings, so the mountain was basically closed, but they were like, oh, the ski lift still works. Let's just go do some skiing, right? And anyway, so they're on the mountain, and an avalanche hits. They get caught in an avalanche, and they got buried along with some other people who were on the mountain with them got buried. They were able to dig themselves out, and then they realized that there were people, next to them that had also been buried, and so they saved 2 other people's lives by digging them out as well.
Wow. I did see a TikTok video recently that some dude was skiing down a mountain and actually tripped and whatever. I don't know, he hit something and fell, but he happened to fall, and the way he fell, he was next to somebody who was yelling for help in the snow.
Wow.
And it was just straight miraculous that he, if he didn't just fall where he did, nobody would have ever found this guy yelling from way down.
Wow.
And he was able to get him.
That's crazy.
I mean, are you a believer in some stuff is just meant to be, or
I do.
some things are just straight outside of our control?
I believe in fate.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 2-sided coin, right? Because we actually talked about this in a previous pod where if a certain thing is going to happen and say it has a 30% chance of happening, those are the odds, right? And maybe you can tilt that in your favor one way or another. But I think at a certain point, there's just a fated percent chance that you could, not to get morbid with it, but get hit by a bus tomorrow, or you could win a lottery ticket. You know what I mean? So, at a certain point you can believe that's fate, or a certain point you can just believe it's coincidence, or a certain point you can believe it's just luck of the draw. But I like to believe that there's, some karma effect that is weighing the scales in your favor if you're a good person.
Yeah, I believe if things are just meant to be, they just sort of work themselves out if you have a good outlook on things and you just keep grinding. But I would say that you never know I guess where life takes you, but there's always, I feel I try to always have some sort of belief that you'll learn and good comes out of everything, even out of horrible things sometimes.
I love that. Amazing book that everybody should read. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is, I believe it is the most purchased book in the history of the world outside of the Bible. I'm pretty sure I have that right.
You just made it.
No, I'm almost positive that is correct. You can look it up if you want to. The Alchemist.
I'm definitely looking it up.
Yeah, look it up. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. But basically, the premise of the book is when you are taking steps towards your personal journey and your personal destiny, the universe conspires in your favor to help you achieve that.
150 million copies worldwide. Wow, you're not messing around there.
Yeah, no, it's a really good book, and it's a super easy read too. Basically about a shepherd who kind of leaves his life as a shepherd to go and follow his personal journey. But that's the whole premise of the book is in the beginning when you start taking this path. That's kind of what we want everybody who listens to this podcast to do is whatever your personal journey is, we want to help you get there, And as you go along this journey, there's beginner's luck in the beginning, the universe is helping you kind of push you along. And then you're going to have trials and tribulations. You have to learn through those and grow. But in the end, if we call it fate or we call it coincidence, when you're going towards this thing that you really down to your core want to achieve, the universe will help you get there. whether it's through a mentor or through luck or through whatever that is.
Getting deep today on Newsworthy Legends.
I know. Look at that. 9:30 p.m. No, 10 p.m. Roger's staying up past his bedtime, and we're...
Yeah, this is way late for me. That book was on the New York Times bestselling list for over 400 consecutive weeks.
Yeah. I think it is. Did you look that up? I think it is the second most sold book of all time.
It said it's one of only 9 books that have sold over 100 million copies. So it must be whatever, a top 5 book or whatever. So
Yeah.
you're probably right.
The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho. Go buy it. Amazing book.
Awesome. Ready to jump into our topics for today? Ready to get Eddy in here?
Yeah. We'll bring him in here. We'll intro him. Maybe have some laughs along the way, and hope you guys have a good time. So we are happy to welcome on our first ever guest on the podcast. This is a guy who's a good friend of the show. We go way back, all the way back to Eddy coaching me at 16-year-old club volleyball. We've both shared the court with Eddy at various times in our careers. We're welcoming on our good friend, also known as Eddy Destiny in some circles, Eddy Delsignore.
Wow, Frank, I wasn't expecting that last piece right there. But
Eddy Destiny, baby.
I'm very, very flattered to be the first guest. I'm a big fan of the pod and the work you guys are doing, and I'm excited for the topic we have tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we were excited to bring you on just because we've both shared the court with you a bunch of times, and we've done a lot of winning together. I think about the time you coached me when I was 16, and I think we won like every tournament that year. And, I obviously knew that you were good at this winning thing. And then come to find out years later, you also got your master's in counseling psychology, and you actually are a sports psych, basically. So I thought that was a great person to have on the podcast.
Yeah, I feel like the topics you guys are hitting are sort of the intersection between sports and sports psychology and the mental game. And like you said, I did go to school for a little bit for it and feel like I'm pretty well versed in it. So it was of particular interest to me. And like I said, I've enjoyed all the podcasts that you guys have put out so far. And I'm pretty flattered to be the first guest on the famous Net Gains podcast.
Well, we'll see if we release it.
All right.
But as of now, you're our first guest.
Well, I'm honored to just be talking to you.
There you go. Hey, real quick, before we jump into it, why don't you plug your own stuff and then give the listeners a feel for who you are?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I run a podcast as well. It is golf-centric. It is called Surviving Golf, and I also write a weekly newsletter at survivinggolf.substack.com. The newsletter isn't all about golf. Sometimes it touches on some sports psych. It touches on some of my personal feelings. Like I know I'm pretty scared of flying, so I've talked about that on the newsletter. I've talked about football. Pretty much, my current event for the week is what I write about. And then, on the podcast, just like you, like I just, sort of chat with my best buddy about what's going on in sports, and then at some point we pivot to golf usually. So, yeah, if you like any of that, check that out. But yeah, when it comes to sports psych, to make a long story short, I ran out of credits to do toward my major in college. So I was taking all electives, and I saw a class with sports attached to it. And being an athlete, I wanted to take a class that dealt with sports. So I took a sports psych class, and I soon realized that everything in that class were things that I had dealt with on the court, coaching, playing, and then in the classroom, presenting, public speaking, and all of these concepts that I had encountered and sometimes struggled with suddenly had a name, and I was able to sort of identify them and become a little more self-aware. And I became obsessed with that class. It was my favorite class I took in college, and then instead of graduating and going into the real world, I went to do more school on it, and got a master's in counseling psych with a concentration in sports psych, and sort of furthered my studies in that particular area. And I think hope made me a better player, and definitely made me a better coach. I don't know if it made me a better player. It's sort of hard to like operate on yourself, but certainly made me a better coach, and made me able to realize some mistakes that my peers were making, and that also makes you better too.
You are afraid of flying? I am too. I never knew that about you.
Yeah, terrified. It goes against all logic. Like I'd like to think I'm a pretty objective person, and the stats show that there's not really a lot to be afraid of. But Yeah, when there's like a piece of minor turbulence in the air, like my immediate thought is the effing plane is going down and I'm screwed. And that's a tough way to sit in a tube for 4+ hours going anywhere. So
Yeah, I've always been horrified from it too. It actually got way worse once I had kids. And then it was like my life. I even started like driving slower when I had kids. You know, just like my life is just worth a lot more now, per se. So that I didn't know that about you, and I struggle with the same thing. So maybe we can mentally figure it out together at some point.
yeah, just vent and cry about it. Are
you a heavy control guy, Eddie? Do you like to have control? Is that why you feel like it's out of your hands when you're in the plane?
Yeah, I've done a lot of self-reflection on this topic, and I think part of it is not being in control and not flying. Like I sometimes think like if I just learned how to fly, maybe I would overcome it. But frankly, like the thought of being in a multi-100-ton tube 40,000 feet in the air, like just never really made sense to me. So I don't really understand how it works. I don't understand how anything that big just stays up there. So, you know, I sort of just pucker up and hope for the best. And you know, there's no sleeping. There's just not a calm moment once those doors close. So it's sort of a crummy experience, but
I'm with you.
And it's funny too, because if you think about it, it's like a millimeter of aluminum between you and the outside world.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that, but it's just, yeah, it's not good. And now, you know, when I wrote about that for the first time in the newsletter, I don't know if my phone was listening to me, but all I get now in all my social media is just videos of bad turbulence. And
me too.
like radio signals from like captain to like air traffic control, and I'm like, can we please like stop torturing me? But on the bright side, it's almost been comforting because like all of those planes eventually land. Like I know it looks like it stinks in the video, so that's I'm gonna try to reframe, as you guys say, and look at the positive side. And like as terrible as all of that looks, it you know, it always ends well.
I like that. This is a good reframe. Write that down.
Yep. Hey, I listen.
There you go. Hey, so our big topic for today is goal setting, and that's one of your favorite topics in mindset and mental toughness, however you want to phrase that. But before we go into that really quick, I just want to touch on something that you said earlier, which was as you kind of delved into this sports psychology piece, you almost found it tougher on yourself as a player because you started realizing what all these things were, and obviously knowing you probably hyperanalyzed everything. And I think that can actually be a detriment to some players once they start figuring this stuff out. So I know I've experienced that, but as you started going through that, did you see a performance decline? And then how did you move past it when you did?
Yeah, so if I'm being honest, it didn't hurt or help me, I think, as a volleyball player. But as a golfer, which is my sport now, I've had, you know, it sounds cliche, but paralysis by analysis. And that's
Roger.
that's like my big struggle is now trying to overanalyze every single little thing and then trying to be almost too aware of my feelings and what I'm feeling and how I'm practicing. And at some point, if you do that, you lose track of just playing the game. And that's not a good thing either. But, you know, doctors can't treat themselves. And sometimes, you know, you can't be your own patient when you're trying to look at your feelings and emotions. So that's what I found. But in volleyball, I think, like, you put in enough reps, you sort of don't have to think about technique and all that stuff. And I was thankfully at a point where I had put in enough reps where I felt comfortable with that part of things. And when you can take that part out, it makes it a lot easier, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think anyone listening to this is probably pretty invested in self-improvement. And, you know, there certainly can be analysis by paralysis as you try to fix all these things about yourself, right? But I kind of agree. Like, I think that we'd be kind of bashing our head into the wall trying to figure it out, whether we knew what these terms were defined as or not. So by defining them, you can actually make more sense out of them and figure out how to solve them, in my opinion, at least.
Agree. I mean, it's important to be able to self-reflect and to be able to, I think once you're done playing, look back with a more trained eye, with a better recognition of what may have went wrong. But when you're playing, and this is probably a different podcast for you guys, but when you're playing, you should just play and enjoy playing sports and enjoy competing and not really overanalyze things. Just, you know, play the sport and compete.
Yeah, I actually saw that a ton Eddy, we're way more similar than I ever realized just from like talking to you for 5 minutes so far. But it's, I found the same thing where it's like I would improve drastically through anything I was working on. But when I would go to like actually compete or go to like whatever, do a sales pitch, for example, for business, it was like I would be analyzing while I'm in it, like way over analyzing. And so it's like you have to detach those two things where you need to analyze like that. But when you're in the midst of competition, when it's time to perform, you have to let that go, all that analyzing go, and just play free. And that is, it's like two different mindsets, being able to utilize both.
Yeah, I don't know how crude we can get on this podcast, but I have a very sort of dirty joke about that particular aspect. So you can probably cut it out if it doesn't fit at the end. But I think, and they say this about golf, but I think it's about everything. Golf is like having sex. If you think about doing it while you're doing it, you're going to be bad at it. Just have to do it.
I love that.
So, yeah, I don't know. Keep that in, take it out. But it's just I don't know. It was on like a calendar that I had one day at work. So always hit home with me.
Yeah. All right. So Eddy, I think goal setting is our topic for today. And you obviously, I think we can already tell in the first 5 minutes, you think really deeply about this stuff. So why in all the world of mindset and all the world of improving yourself and mental toughness, why was goal setting the big one that stood out to you?
Yeah, in my personal opinion, setting proper goals, setting proper expectations can either be the foundation of tremendous success or can be the root of anything bad that happens professionally, competitively. And I always sort of think of starting at the end of a sport or a job. If that ends poorly, for a reason that has to do with you, excluding injuries, excluding in the professional world something like a mass layoff, anything that has to do with just you ending your sport on bad terms. And the term for that in sports psych is called burnout. But burning out, quitting, losing your enjoyment. I think if you work backwards from that negative place, you will get there because you have failed to meet expectations. You have failed to satisfy and accomplish your own goals. And I'd say if that chain is examined, you're usually not meeting those goals and not meeting those expectations because you're not setting them correctly and setting them to a place where you can't meet them. And logically, frankly, if you're not meeting goals and you're not meeting expectations and you're constantly disappointed and you're constantly frustrated, there's really only one place that chain ends. At some point, all the enjoyment that you have for that activity, if you're constantly feeling frustration and disappointment, is going to erode. And once there's no enjoyment left, like you're probably going to stop doing that activity. So for me, cutting that process, or should I say starting that process correctly, will hopefully avoid a lot of those pitfalls that you may have if you do it wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting piece that in going through goal setting, which we all do, I'd never thought about it in that way, that it can lead to burnout if you do it wrong, right? And when you were kind of telling us in the intro that was the reason that it made you passionate about it, I just think that is like the craziest thing is if you can just plan your goals right, you can avoid burnout, which I think everyone experiences in whatever endeavor you want to take on. I mean, that's just a huge piece of it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any like 100% rule for anything, but I know one of the causes of burnout is frustration and disappointment, and if you can minimize those things, like I said, by setting goals and setting expectations for yourself or for your team or whatever your role is at that point, player, coach, coworker, boss, setting goals that you can feel proud of and that you can accomplish and you can get that positive reinforcement from will certainly make it easier to stay with a sport. Things happen all the time, so you never know how it ends, but at least you give yourself the best chance to succeed if you're putting yourself in a position to succeed.
And one other thing too is like when you think about personally and professionally, I see this in business leadership all the time, where it's like you set if I'm forecasting goals for the companies that I work with, especially like bigger companies, if I forecast those goals too high and set the team up for failure, it like really hurts the broader culture. If I set them too low and we're just clearing the goal halfway through the year, then you can just feel the culture just relax, like people just not working as hard. And it's like, it's such an important, so important for that reason that you get that right or at least be willing to reforecast or create smaller goals throughout the year that keep people, motivated as they progress,
Yeah, I guess that's a good question for you, Eddie, as you've done a lot of coaching in your life, both at like the D1 level, club level. I don't know if you've done personal training or personal coaching, but D1 level is obviously pretty high. Have you found that is what leads to winning? Is it as simple as goal setting, or is there stuff on the court that's really more impactful there?
Well, I don't want to sound like too simple, but like talent leads to winning a lot. But like absent talent, I can say like team morale, especially if you're like respected as a coach and your players respect your opinion and want to play for you and want to, succeed for you and meet your expectations. If you're putting a player or players in a position that they can never meet those expectations because the goals that you're setting for them are too vague, or to Roger's point, unattainable, or conversely like way too easy, then like I said, you're setting them up for a place where they're constantly going to feel like they're disappointing you, and they may be because they're not meeting those goals, but that's your fault for setting goals that they can't meet. So I always think like talent trumps everything. But if you want to keep a team motivated and you want to keep a team positive and feeling good about themselves and wanting to continue to get better and wanting to continue to play and feeling like they've improved and they can continue to improve, then giving them goals that are challenging enough where it's hard to obtain, but not so vague or so impossible that regardless of how hard you work, you're not going to get there.
Yeah, I want to harp on this a little bit more. We have a whole process that you're going to bring us through in terms of goal setting and the best way to do it. But I'll brag for you, since you're not someone who's going to brag for yourself. But you've done a lot of winning. And when I think about coaching me on the youth level, we did a lot of winning that season. You went on to coach collegiate club and won a national championship. And just obviously, we've done a lot of winning when we shared the court together. Just fun fact for the listeners. I think the first 3 tournaments we played when you started picking me up, we didn't drop a set and we won the first 3 tournaments. And it was cool for me just being like, oh my God, who is this guy? Like, just knows how to win. And I always attribute that to like an on-court thing, like a mentality piece. But it just is funny to me that you're saying goal setting is the reason all this winning happens. And so I want you to keep painting that picture for how you've done winning in all these different situations, regardless of talent.
Yeah, that's very flattering. But I think one of the qualities I will think I'm pretty good at and say I'm pretty good at is I've always had a pretty good idea of the teams that I'm coaching and what those particular teams as a whole and what individual players individually need to stay motivated. I'm sure you've played with players that if they get yelled at, will go into a shell. I'm sure you've played with players that if they get yelled at will play way better. And there are multiple examples of that. Guys who need a little coddling, need positive reinforcement, and guys that don't. And having a good idea of the personalities on your team and specifically what motivates everybody, I think is pretty important to at least try to get better as a team. But as they always say, like, players win games and coaches lose them. And as I coached more and more, I saw a lot of coaches lose a lot of games, and I saw a lot of players win a lot of games. And I do think that is one of those cliches that is probably true.
Yeah, and you see that in business a lot. You'll see the drastic difference between employees and how they react to various levels of feedback, right? Like, some you have to really walk on eggshells in the way you present it, and some it's just like they'll get mad at you if they sense that you're like walking on eggshells. So just tell it to me straight up. Like, I can't stand it when someone is like trying to tell me in like a political way. I'm like, just spit it out. I can take it.
Don't waste my time. Just get, let's get to the point.
Exactly. Here. Exactly. Let's just move through it. Right. So it's I really love that sort of like psychologist, whatever approach to coaching each person uniquely. One other thing too.
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Sorry, is how in the world did you backpack a young Frank Field? Because I know what a young Frank Field was like. How did you backpack a young Frank Field to all these victories? I mean, that's pure mental toughness.
Yeah. I'd say when you strip away some of the immaturity there was a great desire to improve as a player, and that desire has, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Frank, but you work pretty hard at getting better. So I think once you matured a little bit, I think the improvement sort of took over. But from a very young age, you can tell you put in the proper work when it was time to work, even though there was a lot of BS around those times. But you always wanted to get better, and players that want to get better and have the drive and will put in the time usually do. And you're very good now. So I think that's a testament to what was beneath the immaturity when you were 14, 15, 16, whenever I coached you.
Well, let me ask you this. Was coaching Blast 16s with me and Matt Medeiros the worst year of your coaching life? Bottom 3?
No, man. It was, there were definitely some frustrating times where I was like, at some point we have to practice here, guys. Like, at some point we have to play volleyball and shut up and listen. But that was a fun team. Like I said, most of those players, if I remember that team correctly, I'm picturing a stunning amount of them are involved with this podcast, if I know correctly.
Was Garrett on that too? He might have been too, right?
Yeah, he was.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so two out of the brain trust of this podcast I've coached.
That's funny.
But like I said, when you have guys that want to get better, it's always an easy job as a coach. If they'll take coaching, work hard, that's really all you can ask for, regardless of what age that happens at.
I also want to make one other point about the earlier on, Eddie, you said, talent sort of trumps everything to an extent. And I want to push back a little bit that I think it's to an extent that talent at a lower level of athletics, talent will just naturally have someone above someone else. But then when you get to a certain point, it seems like the differentiator on most pro athletes and top business leaders is pure mentality. Would you agree with that, or?
I do agree with that for the most part, I'd say. And using a volleyball tournament, for example, I'm sure when you guys play together and you go to a tournament, there are teams there that you're just going to beat because you're better than them. And there are probably some teams there that you think probably not going to beat them because they're just way better than us. And then there's the vast majority of teams that your play are going to be within sort of that contested realm where you could win, you could lose based on on-court execution, but also, your ability to handle big spots, to stay composed, to not lose your mind. I know that's not a professional term, but to be able to perform under pressure and do that. And that sort of separates, I think, like I said, if you're talking out of 10, 1 out of 10 teams you'll be way better than, 1 out of 10 teams you'll be way worse than, and then those other 8 are going to be pretty hotly contested. So yeah, I'd say talent trumps certainly more at the lower level, but as you get better and better and everybody gets better and better and the tournaments get better and better, you're probably going to look for some differentiators, and one of those is the ability to play the best when the lights are brightest.
Sweet. I want to ask one other question before we get into the goal setting piece of this podcast. And that was what you had touched on in terms of knowing the players you're coaching and what they need psychologically to perform their best. And I would love to hear a little more on that in terms of what you've seen in a business realm and then what you've seen in the interpersonal realm. And if there's any tips and tricks you can pass along in that realm.
Yeah, there's a sports psych theory that you can look up. It's called the inverted U, and it has to do with the level of hate to keep using this particular reference, but it's called the level of arousal during competition, and it's not
God,
what you
what's
think
on your
it
mind
is.
tonight, my
no,
guy?
It's not. It's not. That's just what it's called. It's just bad timing with that.
I know Roger and I are good looking, but come on, keep it professional.
I know that was poor timing, but it to put it in a sports context, it's the same way some guys play the best after they listen to crazy pump up music, they get all fired up, and that's how they got to be to perform the best. They got to be all wired, all ready to go. And then some other guys have to be the exact opposite. They have to calm down. They have to relax. They have to be quiet, be more calm in competition. And that sort of varies from person to person. My professional life is not in your typical like corporate world, like I'm a lawyer and we're all sort of wired the same in that we're emotionless. But I'd say at home, like I just think you have to know, you have to pick your spots and understand, you know, in that particular instance, your spouse or your child and their personality and what certain days bring to them, and then what they need as a supportive partner to help them through either a tough time, being supportive, or positive reinforcement and congratulations when there's an accomplishment, or something in the middle, like a nurturing like that. So while I don't really know a lot of my coworkers or my legal field, I know what it's like at home. And if you know somebody well enough, like your wife or your teammates or your players as a coach, like I said, I think if you're doing a good job in any of those roles, you know when it's time to give tough love, you know when it's time to nurture, you know when it's time to do nothing. And all of those things have their particular spots where they should be used. It's a long-winded answer, but I hope that made some sense.
I was just stuck since level of arousal. I haven't been able to move past that since we brought it up.
I should have just said the inverted U, but yeah. Look it up. It's a scientific term, guys.
All right, so let's talk goal setting. So you came to us with, I'm going to go ahead and say the foolproof formula on how to set a goal and achieve a goal. And some people may have heard of this before, but there's a little bit of an addendum that you added to the end of it. So we'll turn it over to you and lead us through this process on how to achieve goals.
All right, perfect. So everybody's probably heard, it's a widely known acronym. It's called SMART, SMART. And I like to add just a Y to the end of that to make it SMARTY. I like to set SMARTY goals. And if you go through every single letter, it sort of guides you on what characteristics a goal should have to be a goal that's challenging enough for you to have to work to achieve, but good enough where you can actually achieve it. So if you start with the S in that S stands for specific. The goal has to be as specific as you can make it. And where I sort of see this fail the worst, something that you brought up offline, Frank, like I hear a lot around January 1st, the goal of I'm going to get in shape or I'm going to eat better. And for me, I just have absolutely no idea what that means. Like when you say...
I feel like I've heard that out of you a couple of years, though.
Yeah.
This is the year I get in shape.
Yeah.
I turn it up and be...
When I'm talking to you, I'm just giving you the surface level here. I'm not telling you that. But like instead of saying something like, I want to get in shape, like you can make that more specific in, I want to lose 1 pound per week, or I want to put on this much muscle, or I want to increase this lift, or increase this particular, your vertical or your bench press, or whatever your fitness goal will be. In my world, in golf, I hear a lot of people say, I want to be a better golfer. And like, thanks, that's a great goal. So what does that even mean? Like, how do you become a better golfer? There's so many different aspects. So instead of saying something like, I want to be a better golfer, or I want to be a better volleyball player, for me, it's like, I want to be better at lag putting, or I want to be better at saves from bunkers, or I want to get up and down from 100 yards this many times out of whatever. Or as a volleyball player, not I want to be a better server, but I want to be better at serving line to line, or serving the 1-6 seam or the 5-6 seam, or I want to learn how to drop a jump serve short, something like that, to make it as specific as you possibly can. So that's the S there. And then you get into the M, which I think for me is one of the more important ones, and that's making it measurable and articulatable. And what I mean by that, the worst example of this that I see is, especially when I look at coaches who I think aren't doing things right, I hear a lot of things like, play harder, or we have to talk, or something like that. And I know for me, when I was getting my master's, we had the opportunity to sort of intern with local teams around the area of the program that I was at. And I interned with a field hockey team. And I don't know anything about field hockey, but I do know something about communication. And one of the common themes that I heard from every single player that I was able to speak with in sort of one-on-one sessions and the coach was that our defensive communication isn't good enough. We have to communicate more on defense. And there's a pattern to defense that you sort of have to communicate and be in tune with what the rest of your defensive back line is doing, sort of like soccer. But I sort of found that when the team was winning, they were coincidentally communicating well enough. And when the team was losing, they weren't. But for me, like, I heard the exact same amount in both scenarios. So I was like, well, what exactly do you mean by that? How do you gauge that? How do you gauge that as successful or as a failure? So we ended up as a team having the coach put in a numeric system per game, per practice. We've communicated at an 8 out of 10 this practice, or a 6 out of 10 this practice, and our goal for every practice is, let's say, like a 7.5. So just putting some measure to every single goal, so you know when you've met it. Because if you just say, I'm going to be better, when does better happen? How do you determine whether you've met, I'm going to be better at this? You can't. So if you attach a number to it, if you attach some sort of scale to it where you can say for sure that you've met it or you haven't, that's a pretty good way to see success.
Now, in the case of that, the coach, that still feels pretty subjective though, right? Because if he's being colored by this win or loss piece of it, he could say, we lost, we communicated at a 6, and then we won, we communicated at an 8, even if it was the same level of communication.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling an abbreviated story there, Frank, but there was a discussion where, you know, we have to be process oriented and all of those things that I've heard you guys touch on about not being solely like governed by the results and being more in tune with the process. So there was sort of a discussion that, hey, like, just because you're winning doesn't mean you have to have communicated well. Like, they're not mutually exclusive in that way. So
I guess just in that situation, was that measurable enough?
I'd like to think so. There was certainly a lot more buy-in from the players. That ended up being a two-way scale. What the players, or what, you know, specifically the defenders, thought they were doing themselves and as a unit, what number they were on, and then sort of averaging out their number, and then having the coach give his number, double blind. And then every practice they would sort of compare, and if there was a large discrepancy, talking about why that happened. But just having something like that where you can at least just get a starting point to, you know, if I think this is a 1 and you think this is a 9, like, okay, we have something to talk about. But if we're, you know, 6, 7, 7, 8, then, you know, at least we have the same idea of what happened, and we have this. We're looking at the same picture.
Can I almost back up for a minute and say, like, normally when you start goals, it starts with some sort of passion. Like, so for example, right now I'm trying to get better at pickleball. And how do you like start before you get down to something specific? So you're right, like basically it's like the narrative. We talked about this on our first episode, which is narrative forming. We have these like broad sort of toxic narratives, and then we have to drill down into them. Do you have any tips for how you even start to determine what you actually want to get better at, and before you even start drilling down into the specifics?
Yep. Roger, I know nothing about pickleball, so I'll try to equate it to volleyball and golf. But I think there are things in every sport, and I'm sure you can stretch this over to the corporate world as well. But there are certain statistics and certain numbers and certain skills that correlate to success in sport specifically more than others do. Like in volleyball, I think we'd all agree, like, serving is a pretty major part of success, like being a good serving team. So knowing that's a big correlation to success, I would make a goal that made me better at those skills more than others that are less important. Like in golf, you know, hitting greens is pretty important in regulation. So that, for me, like, that's a big focus of mine. How do I hit greens? How do I become better at that? And then obviously the skills like chain off from that. Like, in order to hit greens, you have to hit fairways. How do you hit fairways? And then it sort of works backwards. But if I were giving a tip, I would say try to find the skills or aspect of an activity that are the most correlated to being good at that activity, and start there, And then, like I said, you will soon find out that everything's sort of connected, and goals will work. Goals will connect to goals, will connect to goals. But I don't know what it is in pickleball, but if you have to have a great forehand to be good at it, like I'd probably start there and then work on the less important skills secondary.
So you're starting with sort of like, what are you passionate in that you even want to create goals in the first place? And then you're looking for the highest impact areas within that, either business or personal life or sport, to drill down into. So that makes sense.
Yep,
That's really good.
That was a very good way
stuff.
to summarize that in a way more concise fashion than I was able to.
Welcome to Rogers as CEO. Just other people do the work, and then he summarizes it, and then takes all the credit.
Takes all the credit. Yeah.
That works. That works. That's an important a correlation to success right there. Is let other people talk too much. All right, moving on to the third. The A in the SMARTY is attainable, and that one speaks for itself. I don't think I would have much success if I set a goal that I want to be in the PGA Tour next year. That's just not going to happen. Or a goal like I want to be 6'7" by the end of the year. The goal that you set has to be something that you can realistically attain. That's in your ability. Because if you don't, frankly, like you're not going to do it, and you're going to feel disappointed. I don't think that one needs a ton of elaboration because it's pretty straightforward.
Taking any experimental growth hormones?
Not yet. Not yet.
Get you to 6'7"?
Hey, I need 10 more yards. However I get it. So open to any possibilities.
I think Germany's pretty good with those experimental drugs.
That's right. Ask Kobe. Ask Kobe. Yeah, but it's got to be something that's like realistically able to be achieved. It's pretty straightforward. R would be relevant to your sport, to your goal, whatever it is. This is more in the team setting for me. Just not being an individual player who's setting a goal that's not going to benefit your team. I can't think of a super great example of that, but I don't know somebody getting becoming better at a skill that doesn't translate to team success. A middle blocker becoming better at in system setting. I don't know, or a middle blocker who doesn't serve on their team working on serving doesn't really benefit the whole there. So relevant to your sport, relevant to being successful at that sport. So it means something when you achieve it.
You could kind of relate that to the first part too, finding those core values that'll really improve you at a faster level.
Yeah. Or that have some impact on winning, or if your ultimate goal is to be a winner, working on a skill that will actually improve the chances of that happening versus one that doesn't correlate at all. Being a volleyball player, wanting to win, wanting to do what it takes to win, and then setting a goal of dancing better in warm-ups or something like that. I know that's like a super out of the outside of not common sense example.
Frank's definitely had that goal.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with working toward that. And then
we had some pretty sick celebrations on that Blast 16s team.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that mattered. That mattered so much in crunch time that we could celebrate. So yeah, I'm glad we could take time doing that. And then the T, time. And what I mean by that is set a time limit, time bound, time specific. I want to be better at getting up and down from inside 30 yards. And the time frame that I'm really going to focus on is the next 5 rounds of golf, or a quarter in business, or a season in volleyball, or an off season in volleyball. But just putting some expiration date on the goal so that it's not open-ended, and it can't there has to be a success or a failure to it, so that you have time to reassess and maybe reimagine what your goal is. And then the why, Let
me just really quick, Eddie, I want to jump in on the time piece. What do you do, for example, if you set a goal for Q1 or Q2 and then you make it or miss it, and now you have half the year still to go? But let's say you set a goal and you miss it for the first part of your season. how do you reevaluate that time-wise? Is that still okay, or should you be setting goals that are more measurable throughout the season?
I think you can do both. I mean, you can have a lot of goals going at once, but I think being able to close the book on any particular goal that you set gives you an opportunity to look back, sort of maybe reevaluate that formula, think about which of those letters was maybe miscalculated that led to it being too tough for you to reach. Or, conversely, being like, the letters and my goal was proper. I just didn't work hard enough or didn't work efficiently enough. And yeah, you can have a lot going at once, and some can expire and some can keep going. But just always making sure that you have time to stop, look back, reflect, and then reset, reframe, however you'd want to say that, with the next goal that you set based on your performance on that goal and based on the goal. It's the goal that you set itself.
Cool.
Was that
Yeah.
Well, it's not about the destination. It's about the journey.
That's right.
Right. You're going to miss some, you're going to make some, and you learn from each goal that you make or miss and continue to refine. So goal setting in and of itself is not a finite, create a goal, and then you're done. It's like you're consistently creating goals as you progress and refining and learning and giving yourself that regular dopamine as you hit different milestones.
I've just had situations where I'll set an aggressive goal, and then if you have a bad month, for example, the whole goal could be shot. If you can't, consistently do it. So I don't know if you have to just rework the entire goal at that point. If you've failed it because you had one bad month, if you have a goal to win X tournaments in a season, and you just can't hit that number because of a slow start or whatever.
Yeah. Well, let me touch on that, but that also is a good transition into the last letter. But I'd say working it smaller than that. Just let me give you like an example of, I want to, in this practice, I have 10 opportunities to jump serve, and I want to make 7 out of 10 line to line. And you don't, and you hit 5. It's an opportunity for you to go back and say, like, so out of those 5, did I have a bad day? Is 7 too many? Or did I just mess up? Like, did I just have an off day? And 7's a good number, and I could have easily got 7 if I had just played a little bit better. Like, that's within my skill level. Like, I don't feel like that's too difficult. If I just had another crack at that set of 10, I could do that. And that doesn't have to be a practice. Like, that can literally just be you practicing by yourself. Like, here's a set of 10 I'm going to do right now, whatever that would be, out of system setting, certain blocking moves, serving. A goal can last 5 minutes of a drill if you want it to. This doesn't have to be all long term or all full season. Like, I don't know. I have a goal to make it up the stairs tonight without falling down. And that's a small goal. Like, these are just small things. So, using that super micro example, like, you take a set of 10 jump serves and you fail at whatever number you thought, like, there's an opportunity for you to look like, hey, was that specific enough? Yes. Was it measurable enough? Sure. Was it attainable? And that's sort of like, in that particular goal, that should be the letter you're looking at. Like, do I have the ability to get 7? Do I need to take it down to 6 and then work towards 7 because I'm not quite good enough yet? So I don't know. That's like, to answer your original question, that's sort of maybe like athlete to athlete on what that means. The specific goal that you mentioned, I don't think is a great one because it doesn't obey the why of SMARTY, which is you. Why meaning you. And what I mean by that is, any goal that you set, in order for it to be the most effective, in my opinion, should be something that depends on nobody else but yourself. And for you, you said, I want to win X number of tournaments in a season. You have a lot of opponents that you have to play. So I ask, I'll sort of pose the question like back to you. If you had what you can consider the best season of your life in terms of how you played, your skills, your physical conditioning, how you felt mentally, etc., and didn't win the number of tournaments that you wanted to, would you consider that season a failure? You shouldn't. But would you?
Yeah, it's a good question. In the past, I have. And the double-edged sword there is, when you set super aggressive goals, that's when you grow the most. But then you also fail a lot more of your goals, right? So it is kind of a double-edged sword in that way.
But I would say, like, if, I can't, I'm trying to think of two guys that you probably can't beat. Like, I don't know. If you saw, like, Mole and Sorum in every single final that you played, and therefore didn't win a tournament because you saw them in every single final, but every single thing that I said before that was true, that you played the best you could possibly play. Like, you inched out every ounce of potential you had during that season. Just because you lost those games, does that make it like a disappointment? I don't know. In my point of view, it shouldn't, because like I said, in my personal opinion, any goal that I set is controlled by me. And more importantly, controlled by controllable aspects of me, not nothing out of my locus of control. Like, there's no referees, there's no nothing, no other third party can determine whether I've satisfied myself. Like, if I go into a golf tournament and I don't win it, but I shoot the best score that I've ever shot, I will be slightly disappointed, but I wouldn't consider that a goal that I haven't met.
Yeah, that's the interesting piece of this formula that I had not heard before, which is the why. I think most people in general set external goals or extrinsic goals, but those are just, like you said, there's so many things that are out of your control in that way. I guess your philosophy on all goal setting is that it should be something that you have control over.
Correct. Or, like I said, I don't think it's wrong to say I want to win this many tournaments, but I just think your level of disappointment in failing to meet a goal like that, where third parties are involved, should not meet the level of disappointment that you should feel if you set a goal that was entirely dependent on yourself and you fail that one, I guess is a better way to say it. Like, there's no, setting goals and setting aggressive goals and being ambitious and being aggressive, as you call it, is not bad. But I just think you have to be realistic about your feelings of which ones you meet and which ones you don't.
Yeah, actually, I kind of want to turn this over to Roger for a second, because when you're setting business goals, for example, and you have the goal of scaling your company 30%, let's say, while that is kind of an internal processes piece that you can build on, there's obviously a ton of things externally that can affect how much your business grows. So when you've scaled companies, do you avoid setting goals like that? Or do you just focus on, I'm setting goals to improve this many processes, which is going to lead to this much business growth?
Great question. So I do financial forecasting for business, at which we're trying to understand where we want to go from a financial perspective, simply so that we know how much we need to invest or how aggressively we need to hit growth or where to allocate dollars. I mean, there's a lot of decisions that come from, look, if you want to double your business this year, you think about it a lot differently than if you only want to grow 10%, and so we set it to sort of get a baseline, but then the real goals are the meat and potatoes of, like, we need to launch this process, we need to go on this. And if we miss the goal because of some macroeconomic condition or something like that, I'll just reforecast it and I won't be that upset, to Eddie's point. And I have a good story of when I played Division I volleyball in college, where we were the worst Division I school in the country when I first got there. And like my third year, we played some like really bad D3 school and like beat them, but it was way closer than it should have been. And we're all just like totally fine with it. And our coach reamed us. And then like 3 weeks later, we played IPFW and George Mason, and we had like insane games. And we had this incredible game against IPFW, and we lost the game, and we're all like sort of shoulders hunched over. And our coach is like, "What are you guys doing? Like, you just put yourselves on the map. You just almost freaking took IPFW, and they were top 10 in the country at the time." He's like, if you just played the U.S. national team and lost, but took them to 5 or whatever, and like where it was a close game, you'd be so pumped, right? So you just got to understand that like you guys are you're within your evolution of it going from a horrible team to a contender. And that is like a huge milestone what you guys did today. And so it was I'll never forget that, because it really made me just think completely differently. And that's exactly what I think Eddie's saying around, like just thinking, yeah, it's really reframing.
Yeah, that's an excellent way again to say what I want to say in better words. But that's the best example I think in sports. Like if you beat a terrible team playing terribly, do you ever feel good about that? Like that's, what I'm saying. And if you play a team that's way better than you and you play to your potential and lose, like obviously nobody wants to lose, but there is some encouragement in that I maxed out, and sometimes like it's just unfortunate, but sometimes people are just better than other people at sports. Like my A+ game is not better than your A+ game, Frank. Not now, at least.
There was a time when it was. But.
There was a time. That time has quickly come and gone and has been gone for a long time. But if I played against you and I played my best and you still kicked the crap out of me, like I don't think I'd walk away from that match like super upset with myself.
Yeah, I like that. I did have one other question on this too, because I think setting goals in some cases can inherently put a lot of pressure on yourself. And maybe that's kind of what this whole thing is coming down to, is when you set these external goals that rely on so many other factors, you can just not achieve that goal and do everything right. But in either way, whether you set an internal goal or an external goal, it brings a lot of pressure on. And sometimes I've found when I just go into either business or sports situations, just playing free with no expectations, that's when I play my best and when I have the best results. So how do you balance you have to set goals in order to achieve great things, but how do you deal with the pressure that results from setting those goals?
Yeah, I'd say pressure is always a good thing. For me at least. If you don't feel pressure, it means you're not doing something with value in it or something that matters to you.
I love that quote.
Yeah, there's always like that pressure is a privilege is like a cliche that everybody uses, but a goal can be to go into a tournament and feel a certain way. Like, it doesn't always have to be physical in terms of like being measurable. Like it doesn't have to be a certain number of serves or a certain weightlifting number or anything like that. It can be how you feel emotionally too on a certain day or in a certain task. Like, hey, I usually feel 10 out of 10 pressure standing to the service line, or I usually feel so nervous going into a match. So I'm going to try my best to take that 10 down to a 7 this tournament. And maybe the tournament after that down to a 6 until you get to a place where you've met your sweet spot of how much anxiety you need to have to perform at your best, which like sort of closes the loop in that inverted U thing. Like some people play better if they feel more nervous and some people don't. But goals don't have to be strictly physical. I think in terms of pressure, like again, like everything worth its weight in salt should have some pressure attached to it. And you should set goals where if the activity is important enough to you, it should be disappointing if you don't meet it. Because at least for me, like if I feel disappointed with a goal, that's like, it mattered to me. And conversely, like when I meet a goal, I should feel like I've accomplished something and I should have some positive feedback too. And if you're just going through, life or activities or whatever it may be, and you don't care either way, then I don't really know what you're doing that activity for. I don't know what value you're getting out of that. I don't know what positive experience you're giving to yourself. So yeah, I think that's a double-edged sword. Like it makes the stakes higher and it puts more anxiety on you, but that's because, accomplishing it matters. So yeah, I think that's a good thing.
All right, that was awesome, man. I really appreciated all that stuff. Were there any other goal-setting things you wanted to touch on before we jump into our Prostrat to close it out?
No, that was a lot. I just think it's always important to reflect and if you're new to this, if you're new to that whole acronym, like try writing some down and making sure you're checking yourself with the letters and trying to make sure that you've set goals that, like I said, are hard enough to be a challenge and be rewarding when you obtain them, but not too difficult or too vague where you can never get any positive feedback for doing so.
Yeah, that actually kind of jumps into as a good segue to our homework. We like to give a Prostrat and a homework to close it out. So we had kind of talked about New Year's resolutions on this call and talked about just, goal setting for Q1, Q2, whatever it is. So I think that's what you're saying for what your Prostrat would be. So I'll let you just take over on that.
My particular homework for myself here.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I don't know if this is what you're asking, but my big goal for the new year was to be better about my flossing, and that has been a very difficult goal for me to achieve. But it's something that I've struggled with. I've disappointed myself and my dentist over and over and over and over. So I set, and for me, I went 5 nights a week. I want to get 5 out of 7 flossing for myself, and that's a goal that I felt was attainable, that was actually tough for me to do and tough to remember. At some point, we'll build that to 6, and one point we'll build that to 7, but that's like one of the more important things in my life right now. And like I said, I think that sort of demonstrates that like goals come in all shapes, sizes, grand goals, trivial goals, and this certainly falls in that trivial aspect. But this isn't. You do this a million times a day without thinking about it, and I think once you sort of reflect and become a little more self-aware and conscious of when you're doing it, the better you can check yourself and try to be effective in doing it. But you're doing it without thinking about it every single moment of every single day.
So for all the millions of listeners back at home, basically what your job is after hearing all this, reflect on the recent goals that you've set. Maybe that is your New Year's resolution. If you're already doing a great job with your New Year's resolution, maybe use this for your Q1 goal as we're halfway through Q1. Q2 is starting pretty soon. It'll be April before you know it. So use this for the next goal you set. Use this formula. And especially, I think, the why part. Make it intrinsic to you. I feel like that was the main takeaway here that is going to help take just the feeling of going through these goals and achieving them so much better. So that's our homework for you guys today. Now, we did have one last piece, Eddy. I wanted to surprise you with this question, but I've asked you this question probably 20 or so times over the 10 years that we've known each other.
Is it how do you win? Is that
is it? It is. I've asked you this question so many times because winning is hard. And I just want to know, what is the key to winning?
Yeah, we have had a lot of conversations about this, and I think the most mature thing I can say, or how I define that term right now in my life, is it's not always about the score. It's not always about scoring more points or winning tournaments. It's just trying to squeeze every ounce of potential out of yourself, if it's athletics, out of your team if you're a coach, out of your team if you're somebody's boss or supervisor. And if you do that, you've won, regardless of the result on the scoreboard. All you can control is what you do and what your team does around you if you're a coach and your leadership style. So if you can just maximize your potential, that's really all you can do that's within your control. And if the chips fall good for you, that's a cherry on top. But if you've maximized yourself, then that's a win either way.
No, I don't disagree. I think you win the day, you win the moment, you win the task. Like I just love Eddy's perspective on basically creating all these small wins for yourself. So what is the key to winning? It's setting realistic goals and then having so many touch points to winning every day, such that you realize that you're just always winning and losing, and so you have a better relationship with both.
Yep. I'm going to correct both of you, because as the whiteboard says behind me, the key to winning is just win.
It's not wrong.
Just win.
It's not wrong.
Quote.
There
Frank
is no
Field.
how.
Yeah.
Just win.
Hey, science would say there's only one thing that you can truly control in sports, and it's how hard you'd work, whether that be in the off season or in the competition. So for me, it's just trying to do that. What I can control the most is my effort and how much work I put in, and making sure I can feel comfortable with that total right there. And if I'm not good enough to win that game, then that's just I'm created a certain way, and I don't jump very high, and that's unfortunate.
Hey, well, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much for jumping on, being our first official guest. Before we hop off, plug your podcast and plug your things one more time.
Yeah, Frank, I really appreciate it. Roger, I appreciate it. I love the podcast you guys do. Really think this is like informative stuff for everybody in all walks of life. So I've tuned people into this podcast. I know I've gotten some positive reviews. I'll keep listening. Please go read my stuff at survivinggolf.substack.com. Listen to my podcast. You'll get some nuggets there. But guys, keep up the good work. I really enjoyed this tonight. I hope the listeners do too. And I would love to come back and do some more of this.
Yeah, we'll have to get
Appreciate
part
it, man.
2.
Yeah, Eddie, you're the as our first honorary guest. You got to play us out with a motivational quote before Frank does the outro.
All right, I love it. So my favorite quote, as I was telling you guys sort of off recording, is from Vince Lombardi, and it's often misquoted, and this is the misquote, as saying winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. And that's been a widely used quote in sports, but it's wrong. That's not what he said. What he actually said was, winning isn't everything, preparing to win is the only thing. And for me, that sort of, again, speaks to some of the themes that we touched on tonight in terms of what's in your control and what you can do yourself. And when it comes down to it, preparation and work and effort is the only thing you have. And that for me in sports is the only thing.
I love that. Yeah. I love that, baby. Yeah. On that note, thank you everybody for listening. We hope that you learned one thing. Hopefully you got 1% better from listening to this podcast today. So thank you all for listening. Thank you, Eddie, for joining. Thanks, Roger, for getting this thing in motion to start it all off. And we will see you guys on the next episode. Yo!